Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So today we're taking a look at some of the early price trends associated with cards coming from Battles of Legend Monster Mayhem. The set just became legal last week, so we have a few early results from regionals and such this past weekend that are causing a few different price shifts. Of course, there are going to be more in the next several weeks as players familiarize themselves with the new cards and prepare for the NAWCQ. On top of that though, there are some cards that were very clearly short printed in Monster Mayhem itself, which is making a lot of these cards seem really difficult to find, and as a result we are seeing prices climb with that limited supply. Let's get started. Kicking things off, let's talk about Galatea-i, the Orcust automaton. So Orcusts are one of the new themes to get support out of Monster Mayhem, and I think they're probably the most relevant out of all the themes. There's a ton of ways to play the deck. I've seen lists combine it with the Horus engine, the Fiendsmith cards, even the Mitsurugi engine, which looks really fun. The new Galatea is basically the card that makes it all work so much better. This is a link one that lets you discard a card to search for a World Legacy monster or the Orcust field spell, and it also has a way to summon itself out of the graveyard. Just a reminder that those are quick effects if you have access to the field spell, so you can search for the field spell, activate it, and then do this again during your opponent's turn. Now, over this past weekend, I wouldn't say Orcust is now like a top tier deck, but it did manage to take a few top spots at various regionals. On top of that, Galatea-i was very clearly short printed. Even though it falls into that stamped slot in the Monster Mayhem packs, I've had people tell me that they're only pulling 2 to 3 copies of this card per case, which is obviously a little bit ridiculous. Now, earlier on, this card looked like it wasn't going to be too crazy. It was coming in at around $15 each. After just one weekend, we're already seeing the card climbing up to about the $18 mark. We have to keep in mind that outside of the Starlight Rares, nothing in Monster Mayhem is currently sitting at over $20 except for Lordly Load, so we're definitely going to see some really high bounces whenever a card does get any sort of attention. But at the same time, I think that Orcust is still in a pretty good spot, where if Malice and Ryziel get hit on an upcoming ban list, I could definitely see Orcust being one of the decks that will carve out a spot for itself in the new meta. So overall, as a brand new card, the new Galatea honestly isn't that ridiculously expensive, so if you are interested in playing the deck in the near future, it would be pretty reasonable, I think, for you to pick up 1 or 2 copies. Up next, we have Ladies Dragon Maid. So Dragon Maids are probably the most popular archetype to get support in Monster Mayhem. They're dragons, so obviously they can do some interesting things with the generic dragon cards in the game, and the cards are pretty strong, but ultimately they're a waifu deck, and that's going to automatically make them popular with a lot of the player base. However, Ladies Dragon Maid is still a really strong card for the theme. You summon it by banishing a dragon from your field and graveyard with the same attribute but different levels. Now typically you're accomplishing this by summoning Parlor and then sending Lorpar directly to the graveyard, but on summon, this card summons a level 4 or lower Dragon Maid from your deck, and then during your opponent's standby phase you also get to conduct a fusion summon as well, which if you're playing uninterrupted can be Light and Darkness Dragon Overlord, which is setting up some pretty big negates. Anyways, much like Galatea-i, Ladies Dragon Maid was in that stamped spot, but it's quite difficult to pull. Remember, that slot has all of the Orcust, Dragon Maid, and Punk reprints, so there's more than 50 different cards that you could pull in that slot, and on top of that, you're probably pulling like 5 more copies of Xiamen before you pull a single Ladies Dragon Maid. Now, players and vendors are definitely noticing, and they are buying up Ladies Dragon Maid from the market as a result. Since Dragon Maids weren't expected to be meta relevant, this card was down at $3 to $4 really early on, and it looked like it was going to continue falling. But over the last couple of days, this card has doubled in price and currently sits at around $7 to $8. This one definitely feels a bit forced. With so many sales over the last few days, it's just kind of ridiculous. Like, I think one person bought 691 copies, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. If you just want to play the waifu deck, right, it's still not too expensive for this card, so go ahead and just get them. But if you were wanting to just collect them, there is a chance that they're going to go down as people start to crack open more of the set over the next couple of weeks. But at the same time, we have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt because the set lacks so much value. It might be one of those sets that just not very many people open, and that's going to cause a limited supply that causes the price to increase over time. So the third stamped archetype that we have from Monster Mayhem is the Punk theme, and personally, art-wise, this is probably my favorite archetype in the entire game. Punk has always been more of an engine than an actual like pure cohesive strategy. We saw some Punk cards being used as an e-tele engine for a little bit, and then they were combined with the Gold Pride when those came out as well. Now, I'm not too sure if the new cards are going to be enough to make the deck a viable pure strategy, or if they're just going to continue to be a supplementary engine, but they do have a ton of potential. Now, no Punk Rising Scale is a really strong card, as it can summon itself from the hand by banishing a Punk monster from your graveyard, as well as being able to summon a non-level 8 Punk monster from your deck or graveyard. It does have the ability to potentially Book of Moon something that's going to be a much more situational effect to be able to use. So I do think that Punk has a lot of potential, but the really difficult thing is just going to be finding a place for it in the meta. To be fair, we do have some other really strong engines in the game right now. Things like the Mitsurugi and Fiendsmith are just seeing play in absolutely everything, so those strategies might have to fall out of the format or get hit on the ban list before we have time to see Punk really shine. With Rising Scale, this is another short print in that stamp slot. Even at release, this card did seem pretty cheap, coming in at $8 before falling to a low of $5 per copy. However, over the last few days, the card has shot up. It reached a peak of about $15 before now settling at $12 to $13 per copy. With this one, I don't really see a place for it in the format right now, so I wouldn't recommend picking it up at this hyped up price because I do think it is going to fall. But keep an eye on this card over the next couple of months, and if its price does fall down enough, it's something that you will want to own a set of just in case. I do want to take a second to remind all of you to check out our website, MST.merch.com. Now, over at MST.merch.com, we have everything that you will need to optimize your Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament experience. We have the basics with white, black, pink, and our new purple matted sleeves, which are my personal favorites, as well as smooth and matted sleeves to double sleeve your valuable cards and sleeves with for tournament play. But we also have some other items that you can really use to customize your collection. We have amazing foil sleeves, including some with the MST.TV logo, and dividers and subdividers so that you can keep your collection perfectly organized and easily accessible. Regardless of if you're a competitive or casual player, I'm certain that you'll find something that you will enjoy over at MSTmerch.com. Alright, a few other cards to look at, starting with Primite Lordly Load. So this card is one of the most interesting cards from the last year. This was originally a bulk secret rare that no one cared about at all, but then they released Ether Barrel and players saw how you could combine it with Blue Eyes, and loads hit like $100 per copy. Lordly Load is a big card because it searches for either Ether Barrel or Drill Beam, but then it also lets you bring a vanilla out of your deck. Now, for the most part, this card is really only being used by Blue Eyes in the current format. It does have actually the potential to be used by various other strategies. We've seen it in both the TCG and OCG doing some really interesting things, bringing out cards like Summon Skull, Evil Swarm Heliotrope, and White Dustin, so it really does just depend on what players want to try out in any given format. Now, the reprint to Lordly Load in Monster Mayhem was very effective at bringing the card's price down. However, it's not as cheap as players were hoping. It turns out that Lordly Load was definitely short printed, so we're actually seeing people only pulling 1 to 2 copies of the card per case, maybe a little bit more if you are extremely lucky. At first, I think players thought it would be pulled at normal rates, so we saw the card come out at $20 and fall to a low of about $15. However, once people realized that it was shorted and players just needed to grab their copies in order to play with going into the national season, the card shot right up, and now we have the reprints coming in at $30 each, with the originals from Rage of the Abyss at $35. So yeah, unfortunately, this is not the super budget printing that a lot of you players would have liked so that you could get the card for cheap. It is still definitely much better than $100 per copy. There is a chance, however, that the card will be reprinted in the 2025 tins, since I believe Rage of the Abyss does fall into that 4-set reprint range. So if you don't need Lordly Loads to play with quite yet, you're probably better off just waiting to see if and when they do get that reprint. Next up, I want to mention Gem Knight Nepirim. So Terminal World 2 was a set in the OCG that gave support to some more dual terminal themes, and Gem Knights actually got some new support, as well as an alternate art for Gem Knight Fusion. Neperim is actually a really strong card. On summon, it searches for any Gem Knight card from your deck, and it also grants you an extra normal summon while it's on the field. On top of that, if this card is sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, you discard a card and then you get to special summon this card out and its other effects are still live, making this a really good card to get into the graveyard with the effect of something like Brilliant Fusion or Crystal Rose. Now, the new Gem Knight cards are all really strong. I believe that they play Neperim, the other main deck monster Hollow Core, and then the new spell all in the main board at 3. They're just that good. However, it turns out that Neperim is the one that was short printed, so it's actually quite difficult to pull. I remember checking on Saturday and Neperim was only like $3 or $4 on TCG Player. I didn't buy it off someone thinking I should be able to grab them for $1 or so eventually. However, it turns out that the card just went up in price and now sits at $8 per copy. I haven't seen any successful deck lists from this past weekend with Gem Knights in it quite yet. I'm told that someone won a regional with Gem Knights somewhere in the United States, so we'll probably see a list come out within the next week or so. Historically, Gem Knights are more of an OTK oriented strategy, but they aren't too reliable because they run a lot of bricks in the main board. We are going to have to wait and see just what some of these successful Gem Knight lists look like over the next couple of weeks to see how real the strategy is and whether or not we should actually be looking to pick up this card. And finally, one last card for us to take a look at out of Monster Mayhem, we have DD Count Surveyor. So there randomly are 3 brand new DDD cards in Monster Mayhem. Now over in the OCG, they were actually released in Premium Pack 2025. That's where a bunch of the other random cards in Monster Mayhem actually came from. It's really interesting timing because although DDD isn't doing anything with just these few support cards, they are getting new additional support in Doom of Dimensions, which is the core set coming after Duelist Advance. Now, Count Surveyor has a really strong monster effect, as you can special summon it by discarding another DD monster, and then on summon it searches for any DD monster with 0 attack or defense points. So this allows you to search for Copernicus, summon the Copernicus and dump something since Surveyor didn't use your normal summon, and then link the 2 bodies off into Gilgamesh and get your combo going. At the moment, DDD obviously isn't very strong. Even when the new cards do come out in Doom of Dimensions, I don't think it's clear just how good DDD is going to be, whether that's at the very top of the format or at the very bottom where it's just kind of a rogue strategy. We still are waiting for the new cards from Justice Hunters, right? So there's big differences between here and the OCG. There's just going to be so much changing in a few months, it's impossible to tell. However, I do know that a lot of people are picking up their copies of Count Surveyor to get ready for that new support, even though the cards are still a few months away. We saw Count Surveyor hit a low of $2 to $3, but it's now a $5 to $6 card just based off of the speculation and hype alone. It's a bit difficult when everyone is speculating that this card is going to go up. It might be hard to buy the card at a reasonable price. If you can, try to find a set of this card to hold on to if you are interested in playing DDDs down the road, since it feels inevitable that the card will eventually go up in price. Alright guys, that is all I have for today's episode. Monster Mayhem is definitely turning out to be a little bit of a rough set. It's a little bit starved for value. I did buy a couple of boxes just to crack them open with friends and to support my local OTS store, but there isn't a ton of like really high dollar cards in the set outside of those Starlights. Even the Chibis are actually pretty affordable, and if you are looking for a specific card, a lot of them are short printed, so you just have to be careful with what it is that you're picking up. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch episode, please make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.